Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1003B, and today's date is June 21st, 2016, and the title of the episode is Power Grid Down When the Lights Go Out. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, out in Venezuela, we understand that the U.S. is using some type of economic war to put a lot of pressure on Maduro. And they're trying to get this referendum passed where they need signatures. They need people to step up, and they need at least 200,000 must be authenticated to pass to the next phase. And the next phase will require about 4 million to call a full referendum to have Maduro maybe removed. And we know how the United States plays those games because we know the elections here in the United States, they are crooked. We know that they rig the ballots. We know that they continually manipulate the information. And out in Venezuela, each person needs to be fingerprinted to go ahead and vote. So this way, it makes it much more difficult to cheat the system. They're trying to authenticate the signatures to make sure that everyone is who they say they are. And all of a sudden we don't have a rush of all these ballots coming in saying, yes, here's another million of them out of nowhere. Now, is this going to work? Is this going to be in the favor of Maduro? We will have to wait and see. But Venezuela, it is like a time bomb ready to explode here. And we're going to have to watch this situation very, very carefully. Here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, we know we had that Orlando shooting, which was a complete false flag. And we know this was part of many different agendas, and one of them was gun control. Now, we see right now that the Supreme Court turned away 2 separate appeals challenging the assault weapons ban in New York, which we mentioned yesterday, and Connecticut. The Senate rejected 4 total proposals centered around gun control. Now, the Senate couldn't agree on 2 proposals to block suspected terrorists from being able to buy a gun, nor could the Senate agree on 2 gun background check proposals. All other proposals would have been an amendment to the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Bill, but it didn't go through. When we look at this, we see they're trying to throw as many of these type of gun proposals all at once. We see that Dianne Feinstein's amendment, which would have allowed the Attorney General to block the sale of a gun or explosive if there was a reasonable suspicion of an individual, but that didn't get through. Now, just because you have a suspicion doesn't mean that you're guilty, and that doesn't mean that you should have anything taken away from you. There was no due process. There was nothing. But the one that I'm worried about, the one that we all should be worried about, is the no-fly, no-buy. And we see right now Susan Collins, she's about to introduce another version of the no-fly, no-buy legislation. And they're hoping that this will win passage through a compromise. Now, Susan Collins' proposal would ban sales of guns to terrorism suspects who appear on either the government's no-fly list, which prevents certain travelers from boarding commercial flights, as we know. And we can see that there was no due process. You don't know how you get on the list. Anybody can be put on the list, and you don't know how to get off the list. Federal authorities would also be notified of any gun purchases by anyone on the government's terror watch list over the prior 5 years, allowing the FBI to put the person under surveillance. Now, they haven't done anything, but now they're under surveillance. This is a violation of everyone's constitutional right. Being flagged, watched for a suspicion that's absolutely not proven. There's no charges against you. They're not using any type of legal justification of why they're depriving anyone of their rights. This is completely a violation of your rights. My rights, your rights, everyone's rights. And we can see right now is that to deny the the right to due process or the right to purchase a firearm, flying in the face of the Fifth and the Second Amendment is extremely unconstitutional and very dangerous. And this is what they're trying to push forward. Michael Bolden said the founders were well aware of this simple wisdom. It was a major driver in the attempt to set up a government that was open, accountable, and most of all forced to respect the liberty of its people by affording them dignity and distance from arbitrary laws and secretive charges. He also said governing and policing by secret lists will only produce secret government. And this is exactly what we're seeing. We are not seeing transparency whatsoever. Patrick Henry, the liberties of people never were or will be secure when the transactions of their rulers may be concealed from them. We see where we are headed right now. The government is pushing their agenda. And this one law, which will allow the FBI, the CIA, the U.S. government, just to say, okay, this group of people, they're suspicious, let's put them on the no-fly list, nobody knows they're there, automatically they're on the no-buy list, forget about rounds and magazines, forget about getting parts, forget about going after the gun manufacturers. This is how they're trying to get around all of this. Now, this is repugnant to the Second Amendment, and it's a violation. And they can't write a law that supersedes the rights of the people. But this is what they're trying to convince everyone of. And what they're trying to do right now is trying to convince everyone, well, if we do this, we have the right to do this. And you can't question it, because we don't have to give you any information. This is a government in secrecy. You are not proven in a court of law by a jury of your peers of any type of crime, by any type of actually anything. And we should all be aware of this. Now, they said they found the 2 black boxes to Egypt Air Flight 804. But they're saying the black boxes, they are damaged. There's crucial memory chip damage to both units, not just one. And very interestingly, when we look at the black box, which is not black at all, it's orange, to protect the stack memory boards that store the information, these black boxes are wrapped in a thin layer of aluminum and a 1-inch layer of high-temperature insulation, and then encased in a corrosion-resistant sealed, watertight stainless steel or titanium shell. The black box must be able to withstand an acceleration of 3,400 Gs, 3,400 times the force of gravity, which equals an impact velocity of about 310 miles per hour. It must also survive flames up to 2,000 degrees for 1 hour, and the beacon should be able to emit a signal once per second while submerged in 20,000 feet of salt water for 30 days. And they're trying to say both of these boxes are damaged. Kind of hard to believe, or they're using this as an excuse so they don't have to put out what really happened. And most of the people and myself believe during this time of this flight, there was a U.S.-Israeli drill going on, and most likely this plane was shot down. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that Kiev, Poroshenko, they are never going to complete the Minsk II ceasefire. They made this very clear. And we see that U.S. Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs, Victoria Nuland, she is traveling to Ukraine on June 21st to discuss the crisis in Ukraine's east. And we see right now that something might occur every time she visits Kiev. We know that something happens. We know she's also going to maybe make a trip to Moscow to talk about the crisis. And we're going to have to watch the situation very carefully, because if it does not go her way, we know that something is going to occur. Now, out in Eastern Europe, we see the U.S. is planning to deploy about 5,000 soldiers to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. And we can see that the U.S. is continually bringing in more and more military assets into Eastern Europe, into the Pacific, into the Middle East, into Africa. And we've been following this for quite a while. And we've been noticing, as we continue to report on this, that the United States government central bankers are continually bringing in more and more of these military assets, military troops. And this has not slowed for the last 4 to 5 years. It has actually accelerated. And just in the last 2 years, it has accelerated quite a bit. Because what they're doing is they're trying to provoke these countries. What they're doing is that they're getting prepared for World War III. That's it. This is their plan. We see that in the South China Seas, they are having military drills with the Philippines. The 2 U.S. aircraft carriers, which is the Stennis and the Ronald Reagan, they're out there. They're conducting air defense drills, long-range strikes, sea surveillance. And, of course, this is in the area of the Chinese, and this is to provoke them. And if you notice, there's drills going on in Poland, there's drills going on in Jordan, there's drills going on in the South China Sea. More troops are being maneuvered into each one of these areas. More military assets are being maneuvered into these areas, continually provoking these nations. Now, of course, these nations are looking at this and saying, well, wait a minute. We have these military assets. We have these troops right against our border. They're having these drills. It's very aggressive. We need to protect ourselves. And then they start bringing their troops up to their borders, inside their countries. But of course, the corporate media, the government, is making it look like something different, like, oh, they have troop movement. But it's all inside their country. Now think about it, if China or Russia, they were having military drills in Canada or Mexico right up on the border and had their ships off the coast of New York or LA having these drills, how would it appear to the United States? I'm just going to leave it at that. We see the EU, we're getting word, and they haven't done this yet because they're going to meet in Brussels, but it looks like right now that they're going to extend the sanctions against Russia by another 6 months into 2017 of January. And we see once this happens, Russia is going to place their food ban, and the whole thing will continue because, remember, the United States government central bankers, they haven't gotten their war. Russia right now, they're looking to development production facilities and supplies of products in key sectors in Cuba. They're saying that Cuba is the market where we'll work in the nearest future. They're going to be selling them Kamaz trucks. The first Kamaz cars will be delivered to Cuba by the end of this year. And we see right now they're using Cuba as a hub into Latin America. Now, of course, they're making deals. Russia's making deals all around the world. China's making deals all around the world. And the U.S. is making war at the same exact time. Because we can see there's one system on the rise, and there's one system that is dying. And that dying system always looks to push war, to cover up what they've done. We see out in Iraq, the Iraqi forces are saying that they want Fallujah back. The U.S. and the coalition forces are saying, well, they only got 1/3 of Fallujah. They haven't really gotten the entire thing. But the Iraqi forces, they push into the center of Fallujah, and it looks like they're retaking their country. Now, of course, the United States doesn't want this to happen. They want the chaos. They want the government to look like they don't know what they're doing. The forces can't fight the proxy forces of the United States, which is the Islamic State. Because in the end of all this, what they really want to do is they want to make their case of how they're going to break up all these countries into Sunni, into Shiite, into Kurds, into Alawites. And this is their main goal, because we have former U.S. Ambassador James Jeffries out there saying the United States is not going to look favorably on the breakup of Iraq unless it is absolutely unavoidable. And he acknowledged that Iraq is in deep trouble, it's very dysfunctional, and they're painting this picture that eventually what's going to happen is we're going to have to break them up. Now, what's really happening in all these countries, in Libya, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Iraq. The people of the country are sick and tired of these puppet governments. The people are fighting back. The U.S. government central bankers cannot let this happen. This is why the U.S. government is choosing the governments for these countries. Look at Libya. The people had no say. In Yemen, the people are out there voicing their concerns, voicing who they want as their elected leader, and the United States is saying absolutely not. This is happening in Lebanon. This is happening in Iraq. In Syria, the people have voted for Assad's party. The people are going to vote, most likely, maybe this August, or maybe next year, whenever they do it, they're going to vote for Assad. Now, the U.S. government, they don't want this. How dare the people vote for who they want? I mean, it's the same thing that's happening here in the United States. Do you think the people are really voting for their leader? No. The leaders are pushed on us. They're chosen for us. The election is an illusion. It's completely manipulated. And whoever they get in there, if they don't follow what they want, they will be removed. Because as we know, there are other entities that are actually controlling the U.S. government. And we can see right now, as we look closer and closer at all the evidence, at all the indicators, we see that things are starting to really deteriorate, accelerate, and the central bankers, the U.S. government, the neocons, they realize that they need this war. They need some type of an event. And we're hearing that out in California, they're preparing for this power grid emergency, where customers could expect 14 days without power. Now, they might not be consecutive. They might be like 2 or 3 days, maybe 1 day here, 1 day there. But it's very interesting that the power grid, and of course they're saying this unseasonably hot and humid weather, we don't know if this power grid will be able to support what's going on here. And they're telling all customers, including people in homes, hospitals, oil refineries, airports, that they're at risk of losing power this summer. And let's just take this at face value. Let's say, okay, there's going to be a lot of power consumption. The power grid might go down. Here we are again in a situation where people need to be prepared. Remember, when the power goes down, refrigeration doesn't work. You don't have lights. You don't have the things that you need. Food is going to go bad. And again, here's a situation where you need to be prepared. Now let's take this a step further, because we know a couple years ago when Janet Napolitano was the DHS secretary, she warned of an attack on the power grid. That not if, but when it happens, because they already know they're going to do it. They've been drilling for this with the Grid X2, with multiple agencies, because they were expecting some type of cyber attack to bring the power grid down. And we see right now that they're prepared for this. Actually, they've been talking about a cyber attack on the power infrastructure for quite a while. They're talking about a cyber Pearl Harbor, a virtual 911. And we can see this would be an event where power would go out, water would stop working, deliveries would stop, and you would have to be on your own at this point. It's funny because the president, just a couple days ago, maybe a week ago, came out and said that everyone should be prepared, that the government will not be able to assist every single person during a statewide emergency. Are they preparing the American people in some way by feeding us tidbits of what's about to happen? Because they love to do this. Now, something even more interesting is that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, they've ordered rad seekers, which are handheld radiation detectors and identifiers, And they purchased these through Smith's Detection. And what's very interesting about this is that the Radseeker order comes under an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, which is worth $409 million. The details of the number of units ordered and delivery schedule, they're not really disclosed. So we have a power grid failure, we have more of these radiation detectors, and we know what eventually is going to happen here. Because as this collapse scenario takes hold, they're going to need an event. And we already hear from these government employees that there could be some type of cyber attack. And if the lights do go out, they're only going to go out in certain cities. I believe back in 2003 when they had the eastern seaboard, the power go out, I believe that was a test to see how they can bring this down. And I think they're getting prepared and ready for this. They need to scare the people into going into war. And the only way to do this is to have power outages for a certain period of time, bring down the financial institution at the same time. Of course, this will be done by cyber attacks. And they need the physical attacks because they need that impact of blasts going off to scare the people. And I believe that this is going to happen in multiple cities. And we're seeing all this evidence pile up, all these indicators, I should say, pile up that they're getting prepared for this. Now, do we know the exact time frame? No. This is why everyone needs to be ready and prepared for this. Because when the lights go out, what are you going to do? Do a test. Shut down your home, wherever you are. What do you do next? Do you have food? Do you have supplies? Take a day. Live without electric. Pretend you can't go to the market. Think about how you're going to feel. Adjust yourself to this because it's a scary situation when it does happen. And you need to be ready for this. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.